For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and gender nonconforming individuals to another episode of The Benjamin Dixon Show. Today is January 1st, 2024. Thank you so much for joining me. I need to begin with Palestine, where over the holidays, thousands more Gazans have been killed, including women, civilians, and children. The estimated death total for children in the region is somewhere around 12,000 children killed since October 7th. The retaliatory strikes against Hamas have led to what can only be described as indiscriminate killing. Over 106 journalists have been killed, some of them killed directly in their homes, targeted by the IDF. We are seeing evidence of war crimes mount up all through the region, and the reality of it is that if you are an American citizen, your taxpayer dollars are funding this slaughter. The insult to injury over the holidays was the wholesale erasure of the Palestinian people from the history books. As Christmas approached, we saw the arguments against Bethlehem, the birthplace of Christ, being a part of Palestine. Bethlehem is currently in the West Bank, which is a part of the Palestinian territories. The arguments that have been given over the holidays suggest that naming of Palestine didn't exist until the 2nd century AD. That is not accurate. History records very clearly in the Greek historian Herodotus that he named it Palestine, or rather referred to it as Palestine, as early as 450 BCE. The contemporary to Jesus Christ himself, Josephus Flavius, who was a Jewish historian, referred to the city of Bethlehem, or rather the region of Judea, both as Judea and Palestine. And so not only prior to the birth of Christ was the region referred to as Palestine, but contemporarily the name of Palestine was known and used interchangeably with the nation of Judah, where Bethlehem resides. That didn't stop any of the people who needed to give cover to the fact that Israel was bombing Bethlehem on Christmas Day. That didn't stop them from saying, oh, well, that doesn't really matter because Jesus wasn't born in Palestine. Jesus was born in Judea. The right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu has even gone as far as bombing refugee camps. A report came out that Israel has admitted that they accidentally used the wrong type of bomb to bomb a refugee camp, killing dozens. I wonder if there ever is a type of bomb that can be properly dropped on a refugee camp. But this is where we are, and the justifications of this ongoing slaughter are deepening, and the divide that it represents in our political structure, that divide is deepening as well. None of that matters as much as the fact that children are being killed every single day, and we have to sit back and look at it and watch it happen and realize that those taxes that we paid last year, they're going directly to the death and destruction and the pain that's being felt by so many Palestinians. I just can't even imagine exactly what the Palestinian people are going through. What I do know is that their voices, their cries, their pain will not be forgotten.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
In your mind, if Donald Trump became president again, what would a second Trump term look like?
Fundamentally, a second Trump term could mean the end of American democracy as we know it. And I don't say that lightly. We all witnessed him trying to steal a democratic election before and going to historic and unconstitutional lengths to do so. And that just shows that he's willing to basically break every barrier to get into power and to stay into power. But also, I'm very concerned about what the term would actually look like.
It is a new year and an election year. Listen very closely to this interview with Alyssa Farah Griffin, Cassidy Hutchinson, and Sarah Matthews as these three conservatives who all worked formerly for Donald Trump sound the alarms on just how dangerous this man is.
We all witnessed him trying to steal a democratic election before and going to historic and unconstitutional lengths to do so. And that just shows that he's willing to basically break every barrier to get into power and to stay into power. But also, I'm very concerned about what the term would actually look like.
We don't need to speculate what a second Trump term would look like because we already saw it play out. To this day, he still doubles down on the fact that he thinks that the election was stolen and fraudulent. And then his rhetoric has just gotten increasingly erratic. I mean, he has literally called for things like doing away with parts of the Constitution, wanting to weaponize the DOJ to enact revenge on his political enemies.
The fact that he feels that he needs to lean into being a dictator alone shows that he is a weak and feeble man who has no sense of character and integrity and has no sense of leadership.
He is a weak and feeble man with no sense of integrity and no sense of leadership. This is a very accurate description of who Donald Trump has been throughout his life, but especially what he represents for the United States of America right now. I can't emphasize enough the seriousness of this upcoming election. And while there are so many issues, unresolved issues that have to be discussed, there's one thing that's certainly clear. Donald Trump would mark the end of democracy as we know it, not just because of Donald Trump, but because of the movement that he represents.
Everyone who is in the West Wing, and frankly a lot of cabinet secretaries, they know how dangerous Trump is. People who I have the deepest level of respect for, like my former boss, Vice President Mike Pence, he's seen more than any of us have seen. He knows more than any of us know. And I would just hope in this moment when we are less than a year out from, or basically a year out from the election, that he would think about speaking out more forcefully just about the unfitness of Donald Trump. This is not about politics. It's not about policy. It is about the character of the man who's the leader of the free world.
Yeah, the character of the man who is the leader of the free world. Here's what's important to understand. Donald Trump has to use the power of the presidency to protect himself from his actions. He is now facing multiple federal indictments and multiple state level indictments, along with ongoing investigations into all of his criminality, not only during his time as president, but in the aftermath when he tried to do everything he could, including January 6th, to retain power. This is important for us to realize because we understand very clearly what he is going to do as soon as he gets back into power, and that is to use every bit of the executive branch to crack down not only on his opponents, but on anyone or anything that stands in the way of not only his future power, but the power for all of those people who follow him like a cult. He is not just there to protect Donald Trump. He is there to forward the movement that is very destructive to American democracy.
Yeah, 'cause even now, even 3 years later, almost, there are many that haven't come out who know exactly what you all know or know more.
I think it's really easy to paint all of these Republicans with a broad brush and say that they're doing it for, their own personal ambitions, which I think is a large majority of them. But I think another thing that we have to consider as a factor is that a lot of these people won't come forward even if privately they'll acknowledge that Trump is unfit or will privately acknowledge that the 2020 election wasn't stolen. It's because they know that they will face death threats, that their families will face death threats. I knew that coming forward and speaking out against Donald Trump, I could potentially face security threats or death threats, online harassment. despite all the personal sacrifice, I knew that ultimately it was the right thing to do. And so I just would encourage others to come forward, because we're running out of time in order to try to stop Trump from being in the Oval Office again.
We're running out of time in order to stop Donald Trump. And this is more than just about any individual person. You have to consider the type of system that has evolved, the type of echo chamber, the type of cult-like following that comes as the result of someone like Donald Trump. More specifically, the type of cult following that will do this kind of violence, that will threaten this kind of violence. This is what Donald Trump has been fomenting in this country for some time. And it's mainly because Donald Trump has tapped into this unresolved issue in the United States, namely white grievance, white conservative grievance. And this is emboldening so many extremists across this country to not only threaten violence, but enact violence. So as she describes the fact that some Republicans won't come out for fear of their lives, I find that extremely credible. But to me, that's all the more reason why they must come forth, because if Donald Trump is not stopped, we will see this go beyond simple threats. We will see this go into an armed, organized rebellion against democracy, because you have to understand, democracy itself is the problem for Donald Trump, as is the problem for the conservative movement. The majority of Americans want progress. And in order to stop that progress, conservatives must use all sorts of violence and threats.
This is the centerpiece of his campaign. He says, I am your retribution. This is a tough question, but let me ask each of you, are you worried that you will face that retribution if he comes back in?
It is a very real concern. I've met with former cabinet secretaries very recently who were also on this, potential theoretical list, and they're worried about it. Listen, I'll say this with Donald Trump is, what scares me as much as him and his retribution is the almost cult-like following he has over his most diehard supporters. The threats, the harassment, the death threats that you get when he targets you, and he's deliberate in targeting, is really horrifying and has no place in our American discourse. And it's unlike anything I've seen in the decades plus I've been in politics. I'm less worried for any personal aspect for me, but it is, he knows how to use government better this time. He can put in diehard loyalists who can weaponize every level of government against his detractors, against the American people, against the media. It's almost too scary to fully wrap your head around what it could look like.
That was a very, very important point. The first time around, democracy survived Donald Trump because he was a buffoon, a moron who couldn't understand how government worked. He was incoherent, and his ego meshed with that ignorance helped prevent him from getting things accomplished. This time around, he knows how to get things done. He has better advisors who can show him how to institute or enshrine his power, and not only enshrine that power for himself personally. We got to understand, he's enshrining power for the conservative white grievance movement that this individual was talking about. The violence and the cult-like following that he has is rooted in the same group of people who are more than happy to overthrow democracy, not only on behalf of Donald Trump, but on behalf of their own individual ideologies.
The American people and people in general have short memories, and so they might forget the chaos of the Trump years. And also they might not just be paying attention to what he's saying now and the threat to democracy that exists. And so it does really concern me if he makes it to a general that he could win. And so I'm still hopeful that we can defeat him in the primary, but we're running out of time.
Our singular focus needs to be, if he is the nominee, on making sure that he is not elected the president again next November.
Even if that means electing a Democrat.
It's really disappointing because I look at these options and I'm upset with them. But at the end of the day, I trust one person with our government and democracy than I do the other. And so I've never voted for a Democrat in my life, but I think that in this next election, I would put policy aside and choose democracy.
Now, I appreciate these three individuals coming out and speaking very boldly against Donald Trump. What they're doing is a service to democracy, because there's no question Donald Trump himself is an existential threat to democracy. The problem I have, though, is that the underlying reality with conservatives who oppose Donald Trump is that they still support his policies. And his policies, as we know, are very detrimental, not only to America, but specifically to marginalized groups in this country. Economically, we see the tax breaks of 2017 that he placed in increased the deficit, increased our debt. So the many policies that these three individuals are lamenting, they're afraid, they're sad that they have to go and consider voting for a Democrat because of policy differences. Which policies are you so disappointed in that you have to make that juxtaposition with Donald Trump? In other words, name me one good Republican policy that is not only good for humanity, but also good for democracy. They wouldn't be able to name one.
Right now, there's a large portion of the population that's not recognizing their mistakes, that's not working to continue to better our country. And right now, we're completely splitting down the middle. On one side, that's the truth, and that is reality. And the other side is propaganda and lies. This is a fundamental election to continue to safeguard our institutions and our constitutional republic. But if we crumble as a nation, we're setting the example for generations to come, not only in the United States, but on the global stage, that democracy is an experiment and it's not guaranteed. We're extremely fragile as a country, and so is the democratic experiment.
Now, I absolutely have to concur with that sentiment 100%, because we are at a threshold in this country where one side is very organized, they're well funded, they have billionaires supporting almost every aspect of the conservative echo chamber, right? They have this feedback loop where they can take a lie and not only advance the lie, but they can advance the lie all the way to policy. They can take something that is fundamentally untrue and they can regurgitate it so much in their echo chamber, in this negative feedback loop that they have, such that it gets critical mass. And then they turn something that is an absolute lie into policy, or at a minimum, they turn it into an investigation and a hearing. And so this statement, I believe that was Cassidy Hutchinson, this statement that she made is so profound because this is the inflection point on the world stage. There are multiple authoritarian regimes that are waiting for the opportunity for this American experiment in democracy to fail so that they can replace the United States of America on the global stage. And Donald Trump is their Manchurian candidate. He is the one who will infiltrate the executive branch at the highest level. And because of his personal ego and his personal agenda and his need to protect himself from indictments and investigations, he will destroy every aspect of our federal system in order to protect himself, giving way to the authoritarians on the global stage that are just salivating at a chance to end the American democratic experiment. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe to this channel.
The world going through it outside, they unruly, but I keep it cool, they can't press me. I keep it pure with intention, they see what I'm on, ain't no vixen. I might slide through with that top down, I keep it tuned with a high power. Put it on me, I'm blessed, big bag, manifest the sky, no stress. Keep no evil around me, can't ground me, I built it since when I had this. No hex on, God can't pause, look at how far we progress. Whatever we do.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
But then why are doctors wrong about so much?
Well, they're right about a lot too.
But very often people who aren't doctors have been righter about things.
Like what would be an example of that?
I would think this country did not allow for natural immunity to be considered. And I know this is a subject dear to your heart.
Yes.
Like even if you had the disease, you still had to get a vaccine. That's powerful, stupid. They don't do that in Europe.
I think they do that here. There's mandatory vaccination in schools.
Right, but if you already had the disease, you have natural immunity. We didn't seem to believe in that.
That was
here.
Debunked, though. I mean, that's
not debunked.
Don't you know people who've had COVID 4 or 5 times? I do. That's not natural immunity. There's no immunity there. You've had COVID 5 times.
Probably because you had too many vaccines.
Now, I know Bill Maher is a fan favorite of many liberals because over the years he's had some shining moments where he clowned conservatism, rightly so. But I think it's important for us to really consider that he has crossed the Rubicon, especially when it comes to COVID-19.
Don't you know people who've had COVID 4 or 5 times? I do. That's not natural immunity. There's no immunity there. You've had COVID 5 times.
Probably because you had too many vaccines.
This statement was beyond idiocy. Folks, one thing is clear. You do not develop natural immunity from COVID-19 long enough for you to not get it again. There have been many occasions where people who had the virus got it again.
I didn't have COVID.
Did the vaccine gave you COVID?
Well, that's certainly nothing unscientific about the fact that the vaccine, which does weaken you in order to strengthen you.
Says do all vaccines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But while you're in a weakened state, yes. That's why so many people like me got it, did not have it while the thing was raging and I was taking zero precautions because I was never that afraid of it.
But that's anecdotal. Like I've had every booster there is to
anecdotal
have,
that, yeah.
And I have never had COVID. I get a flu shot once a year. I haven't had the flu in 20 years.
Right. Well, I haven't either, and I don't get a flu shot.
Okay, so this is all anecdotal.
Right.
But you know the difference between anecdotal and statistical.
I do.
And statistically, you still have a 90% better chance of not being hospitalized, not dying if you're vaccinated.
Okay, but that's assuming all people are alike, and that is one of the giant fallacies in your way of thinking. We are not all alike.
Wait. In his fallacy in his way of thinking, we are not all alike. This statement, this statement right here really betrays all of science, right? All of medicine. No, we are not all 100% alike, but we are sufficiently unlike enough for us to develop vaccines and medications that can treat the masses generally, broadly. This is the level of ignorance that is necessary to perpetuate and sustain this derangement against the COVID-19 vaccine. And this derangement has seeped down into Bill Maher. Now, I would argue he has been this way for some time, and he has been iteratively getting worse. You could see it in his content, but a lot of liberals and a lot of people that are not conservatives tend to look at him and think that he is a paragon of truth and information, even if it's mixed with comedy. But it's not. We are seeing very clearly here that he is forwarding the same type of conspiracy theory nonsense that has undermined our ability to have public health. It has undermined our ability to recover from COVID-19. We're going into year 5, right? This is year 4. We're going to be at year 5 soon of COVID-19. And part of the reason we have not been able to get away from it is because of the idiocy that we hear being espoused by Bill Maher in this clip.
Yes, I would recommend and have recommended the COVID vaccine for the high-risk people. Like if you're 90 or fat, get it. Absolutely. You need it. Some people don't.
But you had...
Djokovic didn't need it.
But you had...
Aaron Rodgers didn't need it.
But you had something like 1,900 kids who died of COVID during the pandemic.
No, I don't think that's right. The New York...
How many of them died from the vaccine? None.
The New York...
And the thinking there is that, well, probably most kids are not going to die from COVID, so why bother with the vaccine? Because it's only going to be a few hundred kids, right?
Now, my search turned up about 1,300 children that have died from COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. But Seth MacFarlane's point remains the same, right? Bill Maher is saying that old people or fat people should get the vaccine and no one else. But then that has left 1,300 children dead from COVID-19. And there's been this casual dismissal of life, generally speaking. But the framing that I believe Seth is trying to get at here is to say this: would you have wanted that to be your child? And would you have given your child a vaccine in order to prevent them from dying from COVID-19?
I don't know how many kids died. That seems very high to me. I know at one point the New York Times grossly, talking about misinformation, they had to apologize. They got it completely wrong. She reported something like 900,000 children have been hospitalized, and it was like 63,000. So maybe those facts should be checked.
Papers can get it wrong, and they print retractions, and you know this.
But also, with COVID or from COVID, Did 1,900 children die with COVID? Yes, it's a whole different story.
Okay, but take 7 million people worldwide. 7 million people worldwide who died from COVID. Like, if even just a fraction of that is, and it's probably a larger fraction who died of COVID than who died with COVID. If even just a fraction of that is, that's still a lot of fucking people. That's a lot of fucking people.
Yes, but what? Okay,
That's
some people,
7 million people.
Things are, and you cannot prevent that.
You literally could have prevented that by giving them the vaccine. A lot of those people died before the vaccine was available. A lot of them died afterwards because of the type of propaganda that Bill Maher is engaged in right now. And I think it's important for us to analyze this because it's more critical now than ever to realize the type of people who are associated with the liberal movement, right? There's no reason for Bill Maher, when you consider his politics in totality, and later I'll discuss this video that is out where he has engaged in the highest level of Islamophobia. But when you consider the politics of Bill Maher, especially when it comes to COVID-19 and his Islamophobia and other policies, there's really no reason for an average American who wants a progressive and a liberal future to support this type of ignorance, this type of intentional obtuseness, this type of misinformation being forwarded by someone with a platform large enough to impact public opinion.
You can, though. I mean, you can prevent.
At what cost?
But what's the cost of getting a vaccine? What's
the fact that you don't even have a clue what's the cost of getting a vaccine, that you don't know the answer to that?
So why don't you tell us? Please tell us, what is the cost? Well, what is the real impact? This is a nice technique, and Seth almost stopped him from using it, but he didn't. But Bill, you tell us, what was the price of the vaccine? What was so bad about the vaccine that is actually statistically and scientifically provable, not the misinformation that's being spread? But tell us exactly what was so wrong with the vaccine that you would rather turn around and allow 7 million people on the international stage to die. 7 million people around the globe died of COVID-19, Bill. Please tell us what was so bad about the vaccine that you would rather let those people die than to have given them the vaccine.
No, you completely want to shut your eyes to the fact that there are repercussions to all medical interventions, including a vaccine. All vaccines, they say side effects just like every medication does. Sure. You can see it in the literature. They can't write it on the back, on the vaccine, so you have to dig them. And of course there is a vaccine court because so many people have been injured. This is not a screed to say don't do vaccines. I'm not against doing vaccines. I'm against doing vaccines that I don't think I need. I should be able to decide that for myself inside my body. But yes, there are pathogens that would come along that I would fight you for.
But don't you think
to get the vaccine?
Okay, but that's a good point.
To get the vaccine,
and you bring me to my next point. Don't you think that the vitriol and the aggression towards that the anti-vaccination movement, the way it souped itself up during all this, that the next time there is a pandemic, our public health system is so weakened.
Yes,
it's
exactly,
so
because of them and their fucking misinformation that made people skeptical. The fact that everybody came out and said, if you get the vaccine, you cannot get the disease, and then of course that was wrong. And if you get the vaccine, you can't transmit it.
But
and
they were learning right alongside us.
I understand.
They're not. You just said yourself, doctors are often wrong. They are, especially when they're researching a brand new disease.
And I am not blaming them for it. I'm just saying that's why there shouldn't be the science. There's no the in science.
There absolutely is the science. There is definitive facts. There are definitive truths. This is what is being undermined, right? This is one of the reasons why I insist that we consider Bill Maher a conservative, because he's using the George Bush swift boat technique. He's taking something that is a positive and he's turning it into a negative, and he's using it against the public health system. Here's what he's done in this last portion of the clip. He has taken the fact that our public health system has been weakened as a direct result of the anti-vax movement. And he says, no, that's not why the public health has been weakened in this country. He said it's been weakened in this country because some doctors made some mistakes. He's asserting that the reason our public health system has been weakened is because doctors updated their information as they got new facts. As they were trying to investigate this and develop the vaccine and understand this novel coronavirus, there were statements made early on that were not absolutely accurate. There was a statement that said if you got the vaccine that you wouldn't get the virus. That was not accurate. I got the vaccine and I eventually got the virus. However, the vaccine mitigated the impact of the virus, right? The vaccine mitigated the effects of the virus. What Bill Maher is doing here is a masterful job of misinformation. He is doing the work of the anti-vax movement for the purposes of undermining our public health system. The reality of it is this, is that clearly, if everyone masked, social distance, and everyone who was able to get the vaccine got the vaccine, a few things would have happened. 7 million people would not be dead, and we would be back to normal. But because of the idiocy of people like Bill Maher, who has an unimaginably large platform, right? He makes this statement and says that I want to be able to make the decision for myself. But he uses his platform to influence the decisions of everyone who listens to him. If we had done our part, if every individual had even just masked for a month or socially distanced or shut down for a month, we could be out of the pandemic. But not only are we still in a 4 to 5 year long pandemic, we have weakened the idea of public health to the extent where when something comes around next time, we're not going to be prepared for it because there's an entire generation of people who are listening to the type of idiocy that's coming out of the mouth of Bill Maher.
There shouldn't be the science. There's no the in science. That's what you want. You want just to be the one true opinion.
No. That's not true at all.
Well, it is.
No, the strength
and
of
you don't
science,
want to. You don't know
the strength of science is that it has the capacity to evolve.
But just acknowledge that vaccines have ill effects on some people.
They do. Of course they
anecdotally.
do. But statistically, it's here and it's here. It's like it's people. How many? 7 million people died of COVID. How many people died from the vaccine? Probably a few.
But
I don't know what the number is, but I know it's not 7 million.
Conservative commentator Tim Pool wants nothing more than for a second civil war to break out in America. A quick examination of his timeline that was done by Chuds of TikTok on Twitter shows the following. Over and over and over again, Tim Pool talks about civil war. For example, you are in a civil war. Are we really, Tim? Civil war. One time he just said civil war, and that was it. Okay. He said, it all depends on what happens next, but should this escalate, then history will regard everything happening now as the second civil war period. You are in a civil war back in August. You are in a civil war back in July. And then he says in June, 5 years ago, I was worried that rising tribalism and political street fights could be a precursor to civil war. We are now at the president has arrested his political rival phase, suggesting that this is a precursor to civil war. You can see on this image on your screen the many, many times that he has talked about it. But here's one of the things that I like most about Grok on Twitter. That particular artificial intelligence platform is able to scan all of Twitter and to do an analysis of an individual's timeline. And so what I did was I put Grok to the test to examine the usage of the rhetoric and the framing of Tim Pool suggesting over and over again that we're either in or headed into a civil war. And this is what Grok found. Number one, Tim Pool's ex-posts about civil war have increased in frequency over time with high engagement from users. Tim Pool's ex-posts about civil war contribute to the polarization of opinions on the platform as users engage in heated debates about the likelihood and consequences of such an event. And they gave a hypothesis as to why. It says Tim Pool's ex-post about civil war may contribute to increased polarization and likelihood of a second American Civil War due to their frequency and high engagement of or with these posts. In other words, some of his most popular posts are about the second Civil War. And so as he continues to engage in this conversation about the possibility of a second Civil War, he is creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. He is encouraging it with this rhetoric, Whether he's trying to do it directly or indirectly, the result, because of the increased engagement, is this is all Tim Pool talks about. But that was just the first part of the analysis that Grok did. The second level of analysis found this. Tim Pool's ex-posts about civil war often reference political events and controversies, using alarmist language and external sources to support his claims. Tim Pool's ex-posts about civil war may contribute to the polarization of opinions by presenting a one-sided view of events and using alarmist language to elicit strong reactions from users, because you do realize that if he doesn't use that type of rhetoric, then he wouldn't get the likes and the retweets that he gets. Continuing on, Grok said the following, quote, Tim Pool's ex-post about civil war may contribute to increased polarization and the likelihood of a second civil war by presenting a one-sided view of events and using provocative language to elicit strong reactions from users. I mean, isn't that the point, right? That's the entire MO of the conservative echo chamber, right? It's to feed them red meat. And the more red meat that they feed them, the better they perform. But in this case, Tim Pool's particular red meat is talk of a second civil war, insisting that we're already in it and telling people that they need to prepare for it. The bottom line is this: Tim Pool wants a second civil war. That's all he talks about. That's what he's pushing for. And the funny thing about it is that Tim Pool is not the kind of guy who actually is going to show up and be on the front line of a civil war. He's the type of guy who will monetize the possibility of a civil war before it happens. And like some of the political commentators in Ukraine who supported Vladimir Putin, similarly, they use their platforms to create the narrative of the invasion, to create and support the narrative of Vladimir Putin. And when Vladimir Putin finally invaded, they just skipped town and went to Russia. I wonder where Tim Pool will go after he is successful at inciting a second civil war. One last thing, Elon Musk has given Grok a serious mode and a sarcastic mode. So I switched back to the sarcastic mode and asked Grok to roast Tim Pool and his fetish for a second civil war. Grok said the following, quote, "Oh boy, Tim Civil War Pool, the guy who wants a war so bad he's practically begging for it like a kid on Christmas Eve. I mean, come on, Tim. You've mentioned it more times than a broken record on the chorus of a terrible song. It's like you're trying to manifest a war through sheer force of will and repetition. Maybe you should change your name to Tim War is a Coming Pool, just to really hammer the point home. But hey, keep talking about it, Tim. I'm sure the war will start any day now, just like that check from the Nigerian prince you've been waiting for." Now, Grok isn't going to win any awards for its comedy, but one thing is clear. It was able to discern the fact that Tim Pool wants nothing more than a second civil war. And you have to ask yourself the question of why. And then you also have to assert this. Tim has no responsibilities in life. No family, no kids. His family doesn't even like him. I'm sorry. Wait. No, this stuff. Okay. He has no family. He has no wife. He has no kids. He has no responsibility to anything other than his skate park. So to me, anyone who has no responsibilities in life and no children, instigating a second civil war needs to be the first ones on the front line. And he should make sure that he wears that beanie so we could easily, or they can easily recognize him as being the man who instigated through his rhetoric and his platform, the Second American Civil War.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.